If the word networking makes you cringe, you're not alone. Our guest today has helped over 3,500 professionals, from job seekers to Fortune 500 leaders, transform the way that they connect with other people so that they can land life changing opportunities. And today we welcome Matthew Pollard, bestselling author of The Introvert's Edge to Networking. And I'm going to ask him all the questions that you and I both want to know to find out how even the most introverted professionals can build a really powerful network without feeling fake or overwhelmed. Matthew, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
I'm ecstatic to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you don't mind, I would love to kind of jump right into the deep end and ask you the one question that kind of got answered for me as I read your book. And that is, why do introverts actually have an edge, a natural advantage when it comes to networking?
It's funny that we think we don't. I think that the world thinks that, those gregarious activities like sales, networking, public speaking, being on podcast, even though there's two introverts here talking about networking, we're not great at doing these outgoing extroverted or so-called extroverted behaviors. And it's just not true. One of the things that I've discovered is that introverts make the best salespeople. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but they do. They make the best salespeople. They make the best public speakers. I think they're amazing on podcasts. And I think they make the best networkers. And not only do I think that, I've proven it time and time again. And actually, Ivan Misner, the founder of BNI, which is the world's largest networking group, I actually interviewed him on my Introvert's Edge podcast. And he actually surveyed a whole bunch of the BNI members and found out that the things that people appreciate most out of networking are actually more akin to introverted characteristics, and things that people don't like that much are actually more akin to extroverted behaviors. So I think even while we look around a networking room and see a whole bunch of people that we think are networking really, really well, all they're really doing is what I call transactional networking. They're walking around going, do you want to buy from me? No. What about you? What about you? What about you? Or they're doing what I call aimless networking, which is where they're walking up to somebody and they don't want to be promotional, they don't want to be transactional. So because of that, they'll have these shallow conversations where at the end of that conversation, somebody might, or in the middle, somebody might say, so what is it you do? And the natural response is always, well, my day job is this, or that we try and undersell it so we're not too promotional. I mean, who wants to buy off someone like that? Who wants to have somebody to work for them that doesn't seem overly excited about what they do? And it's just how we've been programmed to behave if we don't want to be transactional. The truth is, neither of those strategies work. And if we lean into strategies that do work far more authentically, far more effectively, then the introverted skill set is hugely powerful. So, what are some of those skills? Well, the answer is we are amazing listeners. Now, some might say that extroverts aren't the best listeners, but there are coaching and training that they can utilize in order to learn that skill. The reason I focus so much time on helping introverts is because we believe there's this gift of gab barrier to actually getting to success. And again, that's just not true. We're amazing listeners. We're hugely empathetic, which for me, I feel is really powerful in a networking room because we actually not only truly listen, but we can truly understand and we feel people's pain and we feel people's excitement. We can generally rally for people. We're not just thinking about the next thing to say. Now, if you've got a great networking system or a great networking process, you're not stuck in your head trying to figure that out ever. You should know exactly what to say all the time. And then on top of that, we're really great at synthesizing ideas because we're listening, because we're empathizing, and our well, and this is both a positive and a negative. See, we're really good at going away and thinking about ideas and concepts and coming back with new information, which is great when you're networking, because if you meet someone and you want to have a dialogue later, you've remembered what they've said, you've thought about it. But the problem is if you don't have a plan on what you're going to say, then sometimes you say the thing you didn't want to say, or you wish you said something better. And because of that, you then go home and ruminate, and that's not healthy. As a matter of fact, even when I speak from stage, I tell myself that I'm not allowed to critique my performance until the next day because I'm too emotionally charged from it. Now, what I find is if we lean into a strategy that works for us, and if we do the planning and preparation that comes with that, we go from introverts going, oh my gosh, I hate networking and it takes so much energy from me, to, wow, I actually really quite enjoyed that. And people make the mistake of going, well, that maybe I'm becoming more extroverted. That is not the path to success. Extroverts aren't great listeners. They're not very empathetic. We're not trying to copy them. We're trying to show up as the best version of ourselves. And then what we realize is because there's less emotional toll on us, it actually takes far less energy to do that.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's insightful because, I know if you're listening right now, you're probably thinking, huh, that is a thought that I had in my head. That is an assumption that I had made, right? And the reality is that no one's really born a natural born networker, but at the same time, we have these natural skill sets. And so for you, Matthew, I would love to hear you share just a little bit of your starting point, the point at which maybe you had that same frame of mind, maybe, right, as some of us that might be listening to you right now. And then what was that moment that seemed to shift things for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's really important for people to understand, just before we jump into that, is that while I mean, I'm definitely an introvert, and the number one thing people will say is, "Well, you can't be an introvert now, right? Like you're clearly articulate." Introversion is just where you draw your energy from. That's it. So if you're an extrovert at the end of a networking event, you're probably the one that's suggesting we all go out to a bar afterwards. We keep this party going. I wanna go home. I'm still tired. I'm just nowhere near as tired. Instead of needing all day tomorrow to recover, I'm recovered in the 30-minute drive back to the office, or I'm recovered after I, hit the couch, watch 30 minutes of Netflix, and then I'm back to, complete mental clarity. Introversion is not you're not a second-class citizen. Your path to success is just different, and at the end of so-called extroverted, arena behavior, you're then a little bit tired, a lot less tired if you follow the right strategies. And I definitely learned this the hard way. And look, for those people that have no idea who I am, I had no business being in the world of sales, the world of networking, none of this. I mean, I had a reading speed of a sixth grader in late high school. I was, super introverted. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I got diagnosed with this thing called Irlen syndrome at the age of 16, which basically meant that I could put on this funny pair of colored lenses and miraculously I could learn to read. It didn't exactly help me with my confidence. But for that last 2 years, I really spent time really hustling to learn and get caught up. And I was actually lucky enough to get into the top 20% of my state. And after that year though, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My confidence was beaten up. So I decided with my family that I was going to take a job to just take a year off and find myself. But long story short, during that time, literally 3 weeks into that job of data entry, I lost my job and I fell into door-to-door sales, which was the only job that was available at that time. And think about this, commission only door-to-door sales. Terrifying. Well, if I was to fast forward a year, I went from having no business being in sales and terrified to do it to being promoted 7 times because I literally taught myself a sales methodology because it's also a systemizable process and literally did it watching YouTube videos, which is why I love things like podcasts and these mediums now because these didn't exist before. And gosh, I wish they did. And then if I was to fast forward 10 years more, just shy of a decade, I've been responsible for 5 multimillion-dollar success stories. Now, I'd done all of that through direct sales, telemarketing teams, retail stores. And when I moved to the United States, and before anyone asked, yes, I actually made that decision because I was traveling and I did it for a girl, but I made the decision to make a totally different style of business. And it was a business where I was actually going to be selling myself. Instead of selling an educational product that was going to be somebody else training or a telecommunications product, a cell phone or an internet package, I made the decision that I was actually going to sell myself and I was going to be a consultant. I believe there's something heroic about a person with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to go and start a business of their own, especially if they're introverted and they feel like the cards are stacked against them. And I knew that the cards actually were stacked in their favor. They just didn't know. It's like the world is stuck in this groupthink delusion. So I was like, that's it. I'm going to focus on helping these people create rapid growth businesses. And the first time I spoke about this, I mean, I hadn't really figured out how I was going to share what I did yet. I mean, I was literally just moved to Austin and I was in the apartment gym while we were looking for a house to live in. And literally, somebody talked to me for about 20 minutes at the gym about how much he loved doing what he did. And then he looked at me and said, "Oh, man, I'm sorry. I've been talking about myself for the last 20 minutes. I haven't even asked you what you do." And I said, "Oh, thanks for asking. I'm a sales trainer." And he looked at me like I was one step above a scam artist. Like the whole conversation pretty much ended at that point. I mean, he started to tell me about how he actually owned the gym and how he got sales training in the past and we're all a bunch of scam artists and we showed transactional sales methods and how much he didn't like the fact that I was a sales trainer, I'm like, I started to defend myself and say, no, I'm different. I learned an introverted method to sell, but it didn't matter what I said. The conversation was already dead. And I remember going home and I ruminated over this for days, probably longer than I should have. But I kept saying to myself, I'm never going to say I'm a sales trainer again. And so I remember going to my next networking event, and this was months later because, I'd now figured out my ideology. I hadn't figured out how I was going to network, but I know that sales trainer didn't work. So I said, I'm going to call myself a marketing consultant. Well, when I went to that event, somebody asked me what I did. I said I was a marketing consultant. And he said, oh, I need marketing. How much do you cost? Now I'm talking about price. I just met him. And then shortly after that, somebody else said, oh, we've already got somebody in marketing. Now, what am I supposed to do? Say, oh, I'm different. I got magic ruby slippers. The whole thing felt horrible. And I was like, well, that's it. There needs to be another way to start the dialogue. Because what is it? I mean, think about what you say for all the people listening. I mean, most people will say, oh, I've got this functional skill. I'm a marketing career professional or I work for this organization. And what you get is, oh, that's nice. Or if you've got something that seems kind of interesting, they might say, oh, I'm interested in looking at applying those products or services. What exactly is that? Tell me more. But now you're in that sales focus mindset, or it pushes you into that, which is terrible. Other people say to me, oh, I don't answer the question. I just dodge it and start asking questions. Oh, that's great. Everybody loves to be interrogated the first time they meet someone. It's the whole situation of networking just does not work. So what I realized is that I needed to create something that got people to lean in. So when somebody asked me what I did, I could answer the question and it actually got them to lean forward and say, what is that? Not how do you do that? Or, oh, I'm looking at buying something like that, but what is that? And what I realized is that I'd been going about networking all wrong. I realized that most people, the moment they get asked what they do, they talk about their functional skill. And the moment that somebody does that, that's what they're defined as. And I'm like, well, I'm better than just, well, not better, but for a certain demographic, which we'll talk about later, I'm a great marketer. I'm a great sales trainer. I'm a business coach. I'm so many things. The only thing for a fact I know is nobody cares. Like if I go into a networking room and say, oh, it's complicated, people are like, they're not going to sit down and say, okay, let me pull out a pen and paper and let's work it out. I needed something that I could say that summarized the value of what I uniquely offered in a way that separated me from everyone else. And so the moment that I came up with that concept, I was like, okay, what if I called myself the rapid growth guy? And so people started to ask me what I did. And I said, well, I'm the rapid growth guy. Thanks for asking. I'm the rapid growth guy. And people's brains had a spasm. It was like, I was interested in them before I tried to be interesting. So because of that, they felt obligated to ask more questions. But then more than that, I put something out there that they didn't know what box to put it in. Like, am I in marketing? Am I in sales? Do I help grow grass? Like, what is it that I do? So they asked a different question and they're like, what exactly is that? And I would then say, well, one of the things I love to see more than anything in the world is an amazing introverted service provider with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to start a business of their own. But what I find, I just hate seeing this, is they get stuck in this endless hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, trying to make the sale, really feeling like people only care about one thing, price. And then I would stop talking and I would say, after saying, do you know anyone like that? And then, of course, they would respond in the affirmative because I've planned and prepared what networking rooms, I've planned who I'm going to speak to in advance. Like going to networking rooms for me feel like a bunch of pre-planned meetings. And so when they responded in the affirmative or said they knew someone that was like that, I would say, well, I'm on a mission to help people like yourself realize you really can have a rapid growth business doing what you love by getting better at your functional skill. Instead, just 3 things outside the scope of that really allow you to create a business that revolves around you, your family, and your life, not the other way around. Now, I know I'm talking about small business owners here because my passion really started as that. What's been really interesting is how many times I've been able to help career professionals or provide this guidance, and my book shares the same ideology since then, that because what I realized is the only difference between a business owner is trying to get a whole bunch of customers. A career professional is trying to get one customer to pay them well. But if you don't separate yourself from the pack, especially from middle to high level management, then you're always just a marketer as opposed to the velocity architect, which is the example that I share in the book, who was able to separate himself and then get a job 6 figures above the one that he was applying for. So what I've realized is that by separating yourself and not defining yourself by your functional skill, and then more importantly, when they ask, what is that? Not getting into your functions and features of what you do, not getting into jargon, Not even making it about yourself, right? I hate the elevator pitch for that reason. I do this for this group of people, even if I say one of the things I love to see, I hate to see this, I'm on a mission to do this. It's got nothing to do with me. It's about the change I want to see in the world. It's about the difference that I want to make for certain types of people or organizations. And because of that, people are like, wow. And then I'm
Mhm.
able to continue the dialogue by saying, I'm on a mission to not by doing this, but instead by focusing on three things. Actually, let me give you an example, and then I'll move into a story. All of this can be prepared, and they are glued to the dialogue because they never heard anything like it. They've been hooked with something they didn't understand. They didn't know what box to put me in. They've not been bragged to. They've got no I statements. All about this person that genuinely cares. And then I move into a story. Well, and in the science of storytelling, I mean, it's amazing. People's brain short circuit and you speak directly to the emotional mind instead of the logical mind. People remember up to 22 times more information. And it speaks to the reticular activating system of the brain, which causes the brain to artificially create rapport with the person you're telling the story to, which actually works better than small talk. So the whole thing is this scientific cocktail proven to work. And that's why I decided this book needed to be written, because
Mhm.
networking actually can be authentic. It can be easy and it can be seamless. And more importantly, it doesn't need to be exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. And really what you've shared is, I mean, in essence, a large part of a framework that you can put in place. And so before we get a little bit deeper into that side of things, if you were to, I guess, briefly differentiate, right, what most professionals get wrong, particularly on the first half of their career, right, up to mid level, how is that different from the mistake you see more seasoned professionals make, at the director and even executive level?
It's really interesting. I think that at the lower levels, the mistake that people make is they're like, well, I just need a job, especially at the new level. They're like, well, I just need a job. And because of that, they go around interview to interview and they're sitting in interview rooms and saying, here's the type of job I'm looking for. Here's the experience that I have. And they're looking for somebody to say that experience fits with our job. And the job that we're offering has this much money attached to it. And then somebody will then say, well, here's the kind of lifestyle I'm looking for, or the holidays and whatnot. But it's very much about you. I've got this experience. I want this. I want this. I want. It's kind of needy, where I feel that the lower levels, they really need to say, well, hang on a second, do I care about every job equally? And your brain's going to be screaming, no, but I just need a job right now. And I'm like, yeah, but you'll get a job easier by doing this. So what I talk about is, and actually let's talk about the major thing people do wrong before they even go to an interview is apply for every job. So for me, I mean, and I'm not saying you can't apply for every job. What I'm saying is for the jobs you actually want, and I wouldn't waste my time, but for the jobs you actually want, what you need to be doing is you need to be explaining why all you want is a job like this. So what I always like to think about is when I'm applying for a job or having somebody apply for a job, the thing that I get them to think about at a lower level is making sure that they talk about their passion and mission for doing something inside their organization. So maybe you really love shipping and maybe you know that customer service is terrible and you're just trying to apply for an admin job, right? Just an entry level admin job. If you say, I'm just looking for an admin job and you're applying for all of them, good luck getting that job. But if you reach out to someone in shipping and then say, the reason why I've chosen to apply for this job is because I can't imagine doing anything else other than being in the shipping industry. I just love the logistics space. I think it's amazing. And my whole life, all I've wanted to do is get into the logistics space. But one of the things that I know in the logistics space that people struggle with is that usually, the level of customer service that people offer is usually terrible. Either it's the cadence conversation or the way they manipulate the data. If your career trajectory is to get into, data analytics or into the IT part of the business. So you explain what you're passionate about. You're passionate about their industry and the fact that you know a challenge that they have and that you're really passionate about solving that challenge. Even if that's not the challenge they have, why would they not want to interview this person that's passionate about the industry? But if you know the industry well enough, why would they not want to entertain the idea that you're this young guru that because you're so passionate about it, has spent your lifetime researching something that they're going to benefit from, plus perhaps get you to do this job why not put that person just above the pack? Why not
Mhm.
hire them because they care and because they might be able to help in other ways? So it separates you. The thing that I find that happens at the higher level is people have too much experience. So I can do that, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that. And
Yeah.
it becomes overwhelming. And so when you're looking for someone to take on a higher level role, you don't want to brand yourself as this person that has a great general knowledge on everything. The problem is with that is people don't see you as good at anything. It's the same as the niching conversation, right? People say, you've got to specialize, you've got a niche in a small business. Well, you have to do that in a career as well. People don't think you're as good at being the marketing manager for a funeral parlor or the marketing manager for a big tech company, right? So you've got to decide what it is that you want to specialize in. I'll give you another example. I worked with one career professional, and ridiculously enough, she was kind of in the middle of this equation. She was a tango teacher that had, for the longest time, 10 years, she'd run her own business doing tango lessons. And she decided that she wanted to do something bigger than herself. And because of that, she went back and studied her MBA. And for literally, I think it was like 6 months, she couldn't get a job and she really struggled. And this is one of the first people I coached after writing this book. And, I said at that point, I specialize in helping, small business owners. And she basically bullied me into working with her because she's like, I need help. And I said, all right, okay. So she said, I'm just looking for any job. And we started to go into passion. And she's, introverts tend to be in their own way sometimes. They're very logical people. So they're like, I want any job. I could be passionate about anything. But once we broke through that barrier, we realized she was really interested in education technology. So once we realized that that was what her passion was, then she could have applied and focused on education technology. And if she was in the lower level, she probably would have got a job really, really easily. But she was looking for a higher level job in the education technology space. So we had to look at how to separate her and make her far more unique. So what I did is I started to ask her questions about her background. And what I discovered is, obviously she did a lot of marketing in the tango space, for her own business. And what I started to realize is there was synergies between this. So we didn't want her to say, I'm a marketer in the education technology space. What we want to do is create a unified message, her version of the rapid growth guy. So what I did is, after understanding all of what she did, I realized that what she would be really good at, or what she was actually really passionate about, is she believed in education technology, but she also knew the data that a lot of corporations buy education technology. Once they've purchased it, no one cares about them anymore. They might have a 12 or a 5-year contract, but no one cares about getting their staff engaged. So they end up not renewing, because at the end of that year or 5 years, no one's used any of the courses. They can see no one's engaged or utilizing it. So they lose that customer, but they grow through a growth of acquisition on the front end. And so what we did is we looked at, well, what if we were able to increase the engagement of people in the workforce doing these courses, which would obviously be in their best interest. And then we would capture testimonials about the success people were having and how they never engaged with other educational courses and other organizations, but this one that they did. And we then use those testimonials in the acquisition of new customers. Could we, firstly, stop the leaky bucket, and then secondly, increase acquisition and reduce costs of acquisition? And the answer we believed was yes. So we called her the acquisition renegade, because it was all about not looking for new customers as only, but fixing the leaky bucket and using that success to reduce the cost of acquisition on the front end. Well, that got her to, she got a job. It was a pretty decent high 6-figure job within the space of, literally, she got 3 job offers within the space of weeks after coming up with this ideology and helping her realize that she needed to be about changing the organization and doing something for them and being passionate about them, rather than asking questions to make sure that her lifestyle needs and her income and her career skills were, explained. And because of that, she made, I think it was over 120,000 more than she was making in her own business at the time. And she wasn't earning a small amount. She just wanted to do something amazingly different. So from a high level perspective, what people need to be thinking about is, how do I make myself uniquely different? So people aren't thinking, do I pick Sarah or John or Frank because they're all in marketing? And instead say, do I want to hire someone in marketing, or do I actually want to hire this really unique person to do this job, because I can kind of have my cake and eat it too. They can do this job, but then they can also do this. And every now and then you'll find they'll create a job for you. The example I share in the book of Justin McCullough, he became the velocity architect because he focuses on creating growth through customer-centric engagements. And he went in for an interview, and literally the person that was interviewing said, you know what? You could absolutely do this job, but I've got a thought. Went and found the boss. And this was a large organization. And they had multiple business units, and they created a job for him to work over all of those business units. It was a job that didn't exist, and it paid over 6 figures more than the job he applied for, which was already a high 6-figure role.
Mm. And you can see how the value comes in when you brand yourself a little bit differently and when you niche in, which I think is what a lot of people have trouble doing as they get into the career space. That's one of the first conversations we need to have, and the first ways that we need to kind of break that mindset is let them know you're actually opening wide open the door that you want instead of closing the doors that you're not really interested in when you niche in. So I am glad that you brought all of that up. And so as we're starting to kind of wind down a little bit here, I know that I've shared insights from your book on multiple occasions, and it's even inspired some of the ways that I work with my clients and relationship building when it comes to the career space. And so I know that your book came out in 2021, and I would love to hear since then, over the last, 4 years or so, how have your views on introversion, leadership, growth, how have they evolved since writing The Introvert's Edge, which is the book that I read? What would you add, change, or remove?
I think I would add an entire element on senior leaders and how they interplay with the introverts that work with them, especially if they're introverted. I would also introduce some elements on introvert extrovert interaction. One of the things that shocked me, and I'm lucky enough that I get to speak at a lot of conferences, and funnily enough, I don't actually speak on the topic of introversion. I secretly insert it into all of my presentations. When I'm speaking at small business, I speak about rapid growth. And when I speak at corporations, I speak on storytelling and how to use storytelling to close more deals in shorter sales cycles, or to attract the best talent, or retain the best talent, or get people motivated around a core mission, or a core objective, or a core KPI. And a lot of times when I'm on stage, perhaps like right now, I talk about my introversion story because people are looking at me like, there's no way, like, it's easy for you, it's not easy for me. I'm an introvert. And people always do this. They project extroversion on anybody that's been successful, which I think is terrible, because that's why The Introvert's Edge, all I do is interview these uncommon, what I call Titan introverts, people that have just excelled in, sales, network, all these uncommon, so-called extroverted arenas. But what's really interesting is, well, and firstly, I should just qualify. People think they can't do small talk. Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman are introverts. People think they can't sell. Zig Ziglar, the most well-known sales trainer that ever lived, is an introvert. Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, if we think we can't do networking, right? I mean, sure, I could say Leonardo DiCaprio was an introvert, but Bill Murray, the guy that can't, that did the Groundhog Day, is also an introvert. There are introverts everywhere. But the thing that I learned is most people have no idea what introversion is. So I'm forever sharing that. But that's already in the book. The thing that surprised me was when I was speaking at a sales event. It was the AAISP, which is a really long acronym. It's the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. And you're talking about the most senior leaders. So I did their big event, but then I also did their leadership retreat. So you're talking about all the senior leaders from all these really high-ranking organizations. And I thought it'd be fun just to ask them, are you introverted or are you extroverted? But instead of leaving I'm introverted, I'm extroverted, I'm ambiverted question, I actually left a text box for them to respond. And the number of people we got some people that said introvert, extrovert, whatever. We also had a lot of people that said something akin to, oh, I was introverted, but don't worry, I'm not anymore. Like it was a disease they had to recover from. And that blew me away, because what that means is so many people out there think that introversion is something that people have to recover from, or that they recovered from. And that, for me, implies, like, if somebody owns a business, they have introverted staff, and they're making those people feel like they don't want to talk about their introversion, because who wants to feel like they've got a disease and their boss recovered, but they're still dealing with it. And as employers, this is worse. Like, you've got, in careers, in organizations, this is worse. Like, so many people that are listening might be the head of a HR. They might be head of HR, and say, maybe we don't hire that salesperson because we've given them a personality test, or we could just tell they were very introverted. Well, when I started in sales, I struggled to talk to my own friends, let alone anyone else. It was only because they were commission only. And I found out later they just hired everyone. And they had this saying, we just throw mud up against the wall and see what sticks kind of mentality, which I guess is a fun saying until you realize you're the mud. That I got that job. Hmm. What if you have a Zig Ziglar that works with you, but you haven't given him that opportunity? And then you might say, well, Sarah, she's great, but we're not going to promote her into leadership. Now, Sarah's going to leave eventually if she's not given the opportunities that she deserves, but you may think you're doing them a favor. One of the things that I believe is, well, firstly, I know for a fact that introversion is just where you draw your energy. There's no downside. As a matter of fact, the upsides far outweigh the downsides, which is why my books are called the Introvert's Edge series. It's why my podcast is called the Introvert's Edge. It's because I believe we truly do have the edge once we learn to lean into our natural talents. But what I
Mm.
realized is so many people project extroversion on the people that they see as successful, and they see that success is becoming more extroverted. And therefore, they talk about this disease they recovered from. And that doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help themselves, especially if they really have become extroverted, because if they're trying to, and I shouldn't say become extroverted, behave extroverted, because that means that you're exhibiting a lot of extroverted behaviors, which are exhausting for us. We ruminate more, and it ends up, because it feels so less connected to who we are and less authentic, it ends up being quite toxic. You have to learn how to be successful as an introvert. And all the higher level people that I've seen succeed find a way to use their authentic skill sets and show up as their authentic selves. But for those people that are feeling like they've recovered from this disease, and because of that, they've got other team members that are introverted, you're either going to have one or two things happen. One is they're going to admit that they're introverted, and you are unconsciously going to hold that against them forever. And that is going to make it much harder for you to give them the opportunities they deserve, or to push them to learn the skills that they need to learn to truly dominate as an introvert. Or they're not going to tell you. I mean, I know a lot of introverts that fill out the personality profile questions as they think an extrovert would, just so they don't get cut out of jobs that they know that they want. So if I was to rewrite the networking book, it would be far more about, well, I would, all the strategies. The interesting thing is, since I got bullied in to working for the acquisition renegade and helping her, I've helped so many other career professionals be able to succeed and grow their careers. And I think right now I don't think I've actually worked with anybody that hasn't made 60,000 more as a result of working with me. And I mean, I'm sure a whole bunch of people have read the book and had great outcomes as well. But so I would include more stories, and I would
Mhm.
include more examples. But the truth is that I think the biggest thing is I would change that, getting people to not just understand that the goal isn't to be more extroverted, but to make sure that when they use my strategies to get to that level of success, they outwardly advertise that they are introverted. They outwardly make it safe for other people in the organization to say they're introverted, and they point them towards, maybe my strategies, but other strategies written by other introverts that they can leverage to be more authentic and be successful. I mean, that's actually why I created National Introverts Week, which is the third week of March. It was to get it wasn't a promotional thing. It was purely, and I don't even put logos on this, I share out a whole bunch of imagery to all of my email list. And I say, look, just post one of these images. And all it says is, I'm a proud introvert. And I ask them to write a post about the fact that most people wouldn't think they're introverted, but they are, because. And it's really interesting. As a result of this work, the Introvert's Edge, there are support groups now. I mean, there's a podcast interview on the Introvert's Edge podcast about someone from the American Heart Association, and they started a support group specifically for introverts. And I don't like the word support group, because the truth is, introverts, I believe we have an edge, but they do need support to believe that. And once they believe it, then really there's nothing that can stop them. And
Mhm.
organizations need to change their cultures in order to help people realize both introverts and extroverts have their burdens to bear, and they have their own advantages. And once we have an organization that leverages all of our employee capital the right way and gets them to lean into their strengths, it gets them to understand that they can help each other with their weaknesses, we have this absolute rocket fuel for an
Mhm.
organization. And it kills me every day to see senior leaders missing out on that. And that's why I speak on storytelling, but I seed in the story of my introversion story. And I inspire people throughout that presentation to also understand that their introversion isn't a disadvantage, and hopefully to inspire
Mhm.
senior leaders to outwardly inspire their staff by outwardly sharing honestly that they're an introvert as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. It sounds like you would add quite a bit to the second edition, and you would, just include, it looks like several chapters. So I know that people are going to be looking across for that book, not only the first edition but also the second. Now, as we start to kind of wrap things up, we're going to ask just a couple of really short, like 30-second answer questions, just to kind of encapsulate. I know there's a lot of really great information that was shared today, and so just some culminating thoughts, right? If you could give just one piece of advice to the introvert who knows that they're meant for more, but maybe just feels a little bit stuck in how to communicate that, what would your 30-second advice be?
My 30-second advice would be to find one introverted mentor that they could follow. And as I said, it doesn't need to be me. I mean, I know I've got the word introvert on the cover of my book, but Ivan Meisner's written a whole bunch of books on the topic of networking. And for me, I would suggest pick one mentor and one thing, because what introverts do is they do what I call busy procrastination. They pick up 6 books on 6 different topics because they want to transform their lives, and then they do none of them, and then they read another 6 books and they make it more complicated. Pick one mentor, whether it's listening to podcast after podcast to find that one mentor, then read that person's book and apply that person's ideology for one specific outcome. Make one shift, because the biggest thing I believe is that introverts need to create self-efficacy towards the obtainment of an outcome that is outside the scope of what they would normally do as an introvert. And once they see how
Mm.
easy it was by just putting a little bit of work into it, then all of a sudden the world becomes their oyster.
Mm. Okay. Well, that's good. We've got our one task to do to get started with this. Now, I know that you're clearly a thought leader in this space. Who you mentioned, Ivan, but who else? Like, who are you learning from?
Definitely check out Ivan. He was a guest on my show, but find the mentor that is the best fit for you. And most of these people have books. The fact is they just don't have the word introvert on their cover. So get exposed to them through the Introvert's Edge podcast, and then read their book and know that those strategies apply for introverts, because they are one.
I love it. I love it. All right. So I know that if you're here listening with us, you might be like, number one, I need to really listen again because there's a ton of information that was shared in this episode. But also, you might be like, what is this book and what is this podcast? So, Matthew, can you tell us what the next step should be if people want to get deeper into your world?
Absolutely. And for those people that have just one question, I do a lot. I mean, I learned to sell watching YouTube videos. So I try to reward that, or try to give back in the same way by putting out a whole bunch of content on YouTube, on social media. And you can definitely follow me in all those places. And if you've got one question, maybe you're a senior leader and you'd like to start a support group inside your organization, there's definitely the Heart Foundation podcast you should listen to. But if you've got one question, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me an audio message. Now, you can do that on an iPhone or an Android. There's a little microphone next to where you write the text, and you can send up to a 60-second message. So send me a message, and once I've connected with you, you'll be able to do that. And just say you heard me on this podcast, and I will then respond with you, because I don't want one question holding you back from applying the strategies that I've shared with you today. But I believe the biggest first step for people is to get out of their own way and believe that they can succeed in networking, career development, and as an introvert. I'm not saying that you need to be a salesperson or a public speaker. I just believe you need to remove all the boundaries, believe you can, and then make a decision from there about what it is that you want to do. And so for those people that haven't read my book, you don't need to buy my book to believe you can succeed as an introvert in networking. You can go to the introvert's edge to networking.com. There you'll be able to download the first chapter, and I will give you irrefutable evidence that you can excel in networking as an introvert. I will give you exact examples, and I'll even give you the framework. You know, my publisher hates me when I say this. You don't need to buy my book for that. What you need to do is just download that first chapter at the introvert's edge to networking.com, and then know wholeheartedly that you can do this, and then put effort behind that outcome.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. You've just absolutely packed this conversation. And so I appreciate the time that you've taken to just share all of this with us, let us into your mind, and give us just a little bit more of that second edition. So I thank you for coming here. I appreciate your time, Matthew. And if you're listening, know that as always, I hope that you can rewind to those pieces that were really important for you. Bookmark this, head over to his podcast as well, check out his book, and just if you're in a career search, know that as always, we are cheering you on, we're praying for you, and we'll see you on the next one.